Three, two. Hey guys, welcome to Billionaire Acquisition Mastermind, number one M&A group in the world. And here we're accompanied by Derrick Chevalier. Just a little introduction. Derrick Chevalier is Executive Vice President of Harrison-Chevalier Inc., a dynamic negotiation, consulting, and mediation service firm headquartered in Los Angeles. So we'll have his information in the description so you could reach out to him. And Derrick, if you could just a little introduction.
Sure. Well, thanks so much for the invitation. I'm happy to be there with you and all of your guests. I started in the field of education a long time ago, and then went into business. Both into restaurants and a club and that sort of thing, and then I did real estate on the mortgage side, and then mortgaging, and as well as real estate transactions. Now and for the last many years, I've been working as a consulting broker. And then along the way, I met Dr. Chester Karras, who is the world-renowned guru, if you will, the first guru in negotiation training. And your guests can find his website, KARRASS.com. They were the first to have 2-day negotiation workshops all over the world. And I was mentored by Dr. Karras for 15 years. And after that, in 2008, I developed over that time a different type of negotiation strategy. So now I work with clients worldwide in contracts and real estate and full range of negotiation and mediation issues.
Great. Now, digging into topics, Derrick. So the majority of our group members are focused on the buy side of M&A, like myself,
Right.
Mostly in the lower middle market, anywhere
Right.
between $1 million to $25 million annual revenue. And as you know, in these smaller businesses, there are more emotions involved. You know, the business is their baby in a sense.
Right.
So now I remember one thing that you taught me, and I tell everybody, but it was when you said that in these smaller businesses, even though a person could be the majority shareholder, they may not be the sole decision maker. You know, their decision could be influenced by their significant other or a child. Could you expand a little more into that?
Oh, absolutely. The first thing that I would say is a rule of thumb, and that rule of thumb is to test all of your assumptions, presumptions, and estimates. That means that regardless of how the business owner presents themselves, regardless of what they say, you would test whether or not their complete ownership, and they may have 100% ownership of the business, but that may not mean that they have 100% control over the decisions that get made about the buying and selling of the business. So before you really get into presenting what's possible or what you're looking to do or what you can do for them, you really want to create a relationship, establish trust enough to find out and ask this question: who else would be involved in a decision if we were able to find the perfect opportunity for you?
Absolutely. Now, another part is that some people are going the broker route, right? And we actually had a talk about this. In essence, you were saying that you want to move the scale from being competitive to cooperative, right? A lot of people clash heads. So could you expand on that?
I can, and that's a great question. Well, first of all, our framework of negotiation is called CNS, Comprehensive Negotiating Strategies, and it fundamentally differs with every other negotiating framework in the world, including Harvard and Karras and Stanford and everybody else, in this way. When people say the word competition, there are a range of definitions. So let me ask both of you, when you think of the word competition, what do you think most of your guests are thinking of when you say competition or competitive mode?
Absolutely. So from
against them.
yeah,
What What do you think?
in my experience dealing with them, we have these preconceptions, or maybe the broker is not cooperative in their way of, the information or providing
Right.
us what we need. So
Right.
we see them a different type of way. Now it's like
Right.
they're essentially a roadblock to get to the
Right.
seller or move on with the
Well, they
transaction.
are. Yeah, that's their job. Don't forget, as a broker, whether it's real estate or opportunities or M&A, the broker is that middle person who the buyer, or rather the seller, has hired to bring that opportunity, to bring that sale, right? So it makes a lot of sense that they are the gatekeeper. So when we say, but I would suggest to you that I've asked literally thousands upon thousands of people, what do you think the word competitive means? Or how would you describe competitive? Now, from each of you, I'd like you to tell me, when you hear the word, this is a competitive situation, or the broker is being competitive, what do you think your guests are thinking? Describe what you think they're thinking when they hear that phrase.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe more of a one-sided agreement
Right.
between the parties.
Right.
Mm.
And so that's the technical side, because when you talk about competitive, that's not an opinion, because if you think about a football, basketball, tennis, soccer, boxing, there are two people or two teams on the field. Of course, there is a one-sided, because no person on the field can play on both sides, on both teams at the same time, right? So by definition, that's a competitive situation. Now take that to a broker. The broker cannot be on your team and on the team of the seller at the same time. If they are, they're breaking the law, right? If you're a broker and you're representing both sides without disclosing that you're representing both sides, that's a violation, correct? So by definition, the broker and the buyer are in a competitive situation in real estate and in MMA by virtue of the industry standard. The broker is supposed to be an advocate for their client, and as buyers, we are advocates for our side. However, in addition to thinking about a one-sided deal, way too many people think of competitive in terms of the demeanor of interaction. See what I'm saying? So in a football game, the demeanor is people are beating each other's heads in, right? Or in a fight, in a competitive situation, the idea is to knock the other person out. So if someone is aggressive or angry or mean or unpleasant or rude, is that the competitive mode? When somebody's aggressive, angry, mean, is that the competitive mode?
I would say so.
Except one thing. Yes, it's a competitive demeanor. It has nothing to do with the mode. In other words, if you're describing somebody's behavior and they're erratic or yelling or screaming or mean or not being nice, you're talking about competitive behavior or demeanor. But the fact that somebody is acting tough and mean and one-sided does not necessarily mean that the business transaction is a competitive transaction, because competitive has two sides. One of them is the way I'm acting, and the other one has to do with what I'm doing, right? So whether or not I am acting competitive, it's easy to spot the person who is acting competitive and then who is being competitive because they're representing only one side, theirs or the other side. The harder thing And the more dangerous thing is when somebody is not acting competitive at all. They're being very nice. They're being very cordial. Well, that is precisely why people, in the face of someone being cordial or nice or acting as if they're open, that's exactly how they get close enough to you to take your head off. Because you assume that the way they're acting is the way they're going to be. In other words, their demeanor in being nice is not associated to their demeanor in business. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
So what we don't want to do is confuse demeanor. So if you have somebody that's uptight, that's a competitive demeanor. Your objective is not to be presenting your deal or your offer when they're in that state. Your objective is to get them out of that state and put them into a more cooperative state of both demeanor as an introduction or precursor to entering a discussion about a competitive deal, right? Don't mistake demeanor for business acumen, right? One it has to do with the way a person's personality is and how they're acting, and the other has to do with what they're doing and how they're acting. So here's what we look at. I measure every outcome not by what I walked into the outcome. And you have a lot of people on your call who go into a deal and say, they read the numbers and they say, gee, if I can buy this property or get this business for X amount of dollars, and I can create X amount of volume, I can make X amount of dollars. And so then they go in and they engineer that deal based upon those estimates and assumptions without ever realizing that the assumptions and the estimates that they made before they negotiated that deal are all based upon what's in their head, have nothing to do with what's in the head of the seller. So we measure the outcome of deals by how much of that deal is based upon information and knowledge we did not have when we started. So there's always going to be a world of difference between what we thought the estimates were and the assumptions and what we could and could not do in a transaction versus the way the transaction may very look. And the more different it looks, the more likely we got the stronger deal than when we walk away a deal. I've often said, if you walk away from a deal feeling really, really good, there's a reason you feel good, because somebody got screwed and it was probably you.
So basically what you're saying is, if you can't find a fool in the deal, then you're the fool.
Well, no, not quite, because there may not, what if there is no fool in the deal? So you have to keep that possibility open, because that would assume that there is a fool in the deal. The question that you want to know is, A, who is the fool in the deal, right? Who it is. And if you don't know who it is, and that's actually a line from, what was that Matt Damon movie? Rounders, one of my favorite movies. But in Rounders, Matt Damon's, which is about poker, Matt Damon's character says, if you don't know who the sucker at the table is, then you are the sucker. And and that is true in real life. So if it may be that there are two astute, really good people that are negotiating a deal, and in that case, then you want to know what your limitations are. You want to be able to understand that in some cases you may be dealing with someone who's more sophisticated or capable than you are. And in that case, making the decision to go toe-to-toe with them, as long as you're doing it for experience and know that you are likely to get your butt kicked, that's one thing. But the other decision that you could make is like, hey, either I'm not sure who the fool is, then get some help. Then ask some questions. And of course, that's as a consultant, that's the kind of calls that I'll get. Hey, I don't know what's going on in this deal. I don't know whether or not I'm the sucker or they are. How should I be looking at that? And that's where I might be able to to be more effective. So the idea is to ask that question: who is the sucker? And if you know that you don't know who that is, it's you. And if you're sure that it's the other person, check yourself and understand, test that assumption. Why do you think that they're the fool in the deal? If it's because they are acting, if they're acting incompetent, well, do you know what that it's called when somebody acts incompetent in a negotiation?
What's that?
It's called a ropeadope. It's what Muhammad Ali did to George Foreman in the Rumble of the Jungle. Now, y'all are pretty young. You may not remember that. But when Muhammad Ali laid on the ropes for 7 rounds and allowed George Foreman to literally beat him, everybody in the ring was looking around saying, oh, my God, George Foreman's going to kill Muhammad Ali. But Muhammad Ali knew, you know what? It's 107 degrees in the middle of this ring, and he's a huge human being. And if he keeps beating on me, 7 rounds later, he would and could not even raise his hand. And so when he got completely tired out, Muhammad Ali literally pushed him to the middle of the ring and knocked him out. So-called rope-a-dope, and that's actually a closing technique. It's called rope-a-dope or rope the dope, which is when you present yourself as knowing less than you actually do, as either a means of finding out what you don't know or finding out what the intentions of the other person are. Because sometimes somebody will come into a negotiation, appear to be very vulnerable, appear not to know what's really going on, and all they're doing is reading your behavior and finding out what you know and what you've got going on. Then if you underestimate them, they just take you right to the other side of the road without your knowing what hit you. And if you're trained, you call that a rope-a-dope strategy.
You know what? I'm glad you said that. Listen, so just to give you I want to get your opinion on how you would handle a situation like this. Earlier today, real life scenario. Earlier today, we have an accepted LOI, one of a few, dealing with a broker. So his way of doing business is we have a signed LOI, and immediately we sign a purchase and sell agreement. And then only then will he give us more documentation,
right?
Documentation pertaining to the business, so we could perform due diligence, but not before we have a purchase and sell agreement. And his rationality behind that is if we're 30 days, 45 days in, and we decide to pull out for any reason, we're just going to leave him hanging and we're not going to bite the deal. So he actually wants us to be committed because the LOI is non-binding. He calls it desk due diligence.
Right.
What he calls it. So How would you handle something like that? Would you completely walk away and say, you know what, that's not happening? Because why would we commit to a deal without actually seeing, is there a lawsuit? What's the agreements with the if there's any other agreement with the third-party vendors and stuff like that? How would you handle the situation? Well,
here's a couple of things. That first of all, the answer that I'm giving you based upon your description is an answer based upon your description. And each individual is going to be different. I'll tell you why, because the broker is going to be different. Okay, if you follow the line of what I've been saying here and apply it to your question or the issue, because it's real life and it happened today, the first thing that your description tells me is that there's been a step missed in the building of the relationship between yourself and the broker. So here we use an acronym called AIIDR. The first thing when you're dealing with the brokers, or anybody, the first thing you have to do is get their attention. Because if you don't have their attention, it doesn't matter what you do, correct? You don't get that broker's attention, they're not going to respond to your call, much less to your deal or anything else, right? Then you get their attention. Why? Because you want to see if they're interested in doing business with you. That's why you do it. So if you get somebody's attention And in order to create interest, how do you know that you got their attention? Because you created interest. You get their interest because you want to influence them to make a decision that is in your best interest or perhaps in their best interest, depending on your business goal and objective. So if you influence a person to make a decision, to take an action, they take that action, and then you see the result. So if you interacted with a broker, you present your opportunity, you present yourself, you present your company, and you present your process, and then they come out and say, well, that's great, but I'm not going to sign until you sign, right? What that tells you is you missed a step. You did not significantly influence that broker to trust you to take that next action. So the question is not the issue as to what they're saying. They're making a demand on you. And the question I would ask you is, where did that policy come from in that broker's career?
It's his firm. That's what he said. And the thing is,
that's called. Go ahead. No. Go ahead. He said it was his firm. He said it was his firm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and there was a lot of jargon behind that.
Right. So when somebody tells you that it's his firm, do you know what negotiation tactic he's using?
What is that?
That's called third-party restrictive force. He or she with the larger third-party restrictive force. You know why? So I say, oh, my firm won't let me do it. That's so you don't think it's him that's not letting you do it.
No, but we found out, though. We found out. That's the company policy. No, it's his discretion because I got my M&A director on the line, which he's done billions in transactions. He's like, dude, he kind of called him out. He's like, no, that's not the process. He's like, where's this coming from? Is this a request from the seller or is it you advising the seller based on your own discretion? He's like,
and what did he say to that?
He's like, no, it's me. It's not the seller. So we're like, okay.
Okay, so by going behind that third-party restrictive force, and what did you just say that you did is what I said early on, which is why y'all have a program. I said test the assumption, presumption, or estimate. So when you test the assumption, then he tells you that it's a that it's a company policy, you did exactly that and tested it. And what did you find out behind the green door? It wasn't a company policy at all, but that explanation probably works for him 9 out of 10 times. So when the question behind that, if he's saying that it's him and that he needs that, then why do you think it's him? Why do you think he has that policy in place? Because
no joke from him, he says that because previously I was dealing with another broker that introduced me to him. So he's like, hey, you were dealing with that guy. I'm not surprised, you didn't get things done. I'm professional. So I said, wait, are you saying that you're the only professional broker out of the entire United States? He's like, no, but out of Florida, there's 960 brokers, and there's about 20 of them, and I know all of them well. I'm like, wow. So right. I've been doing things the wrong way. Basically, is what you're saying because of the brokers that I've been dealing with. Although I've talked to hundreds of literal brokers, he's like, well, I do things a certain way. I'm professional. I sell businesses. I'm not a realtor who sells businesses. I'm like,
right.
Okay, I see.
That's beautiful. So there's a whole bunch to unpack in there. So I know we're jumping around, but that's good. We're talking about all different things. So what he explained to you is a couple of things. One, he is not going to do anything where his risk of taking a deal to a client is greater than he thinks his opportunity to close the deal is there. In other words, what he's telling you in the explanation of where he is in his company, what he's telling you is a very high priority of human need to him is the need for significance. He just explained that to you.
Yeah, but it's weird because, okay, so yeah, like I said, I'm pretty good at reading people like that. But the thing that throws me off, he's like, listen, I have another guy who I'm literally putting off. The seller accepted my deal. They didn't accept the other guy's deal. He's like, listen, I'm going to work with you. And this is something that I've never heard a broker say. He's willing, maybe it happens, I don't know, but he's willing to, take his 10% and invest into the practice because he's that confident in the business doing well, right? He has all the documents from my lender to ensure that we have the capital backing.
Right.
And he's okay with that. So I'm like, what? I'm like, what am I missing here, right? Like, dude, like, are you bipolar or something? No, seriously.
No, I see it. Well, it is a possibility, but the question that I have for you is but first of all, he's explained to you that the issue of significance is important to you, and he's also told you that he's willing to put skin in the game. Is that right?
Yes, 200,000.
All right. So what his inaction in being willing to take a step to go for you is telling you, A, that you have not established the same for him. He's not comfortable that, A, you have skin in the game, or B, that you can deliver what you're saying that you can deliver. And I'll tell you, it's a math equation. The way to well, let me ask you a question. If there's the equation. If he trusted you and believed you as much as you believe his story, and believe that he is and can do who he says he is and can do what he says he can do, and that he believes that he has confidence in the business and that's why he's willing to invest, et cetera, et cetera. If he had 100% trust that A, you had skin in the game, and B, that you could deliver on everything that you told him, what would his objection be in moving forward?
No, there wouldn't be. No, he actually requested documents from our bank to get things moving.
So we just solved the equation in a quantitative way, didn't we? Because if you know that if his position is, if I trusted that you can deliver as much as I trust that I know I can deliver, then I don't have any other objections. So the area of negotiation that we're thinking about is, what are his underlying objections? We know that one of them is significance, that he doesn't want to be in a situation where he takes a deal and then it turns out that you can't perform on your end because he has to pay for that to his client. And you have plenty of brokers whose track record is such that they may have closed the last 10 deals they have, or maybe they've only had 2 or 3 deals never closed. I do know that as a mortgage broker, I never had a deal that didn't close. And it was simple, not magic. I underwrote the deal. So by understanding what the underwriter was going to ask and what the procedure was, if I could put all those ducks in the row, and then I'm sure I lost a lot of deals because I only took deels that I could underwrite, and I saw that the ducks were all in a row. So my policy became, if I could not see that was true, then I would pass up your deal and find somebody else's deal where I was more sure. Why? Because I know I'm gonna bring 100% if I say it's a good deal and I tell the lender that this is a good deal and I say this is a great file. Don't worry. They're gonna read it. They're gonna look at it, and it's gonna be solid. So that's part of it. So one or two things. Either the objective that we have is to increase the legitimacy of your company, of yourself, and of your offer to him. And also,
I don't think it's that, though.
What's
you know
that?
Why?
Yeah.
I don't think it's that, because there's another doctor who's willing to pay cash, and you want him to do the same exact thing. The doctor says he's just going to write a check. And he's like, look, I'm not even supposed to disclose this, but there's another offer. But he's like, the difference is because, and I'm like, okay, so what's the advantage that I have? Because I'm going to SBA. He's like, well, you're in Fort Lauderdale. You're 20 minutes away. This guy is, I don't know, other side of the world or something like that.
Right.
Right.
Okay. So let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
You just said that he said there's another deal on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
another
the truth?
offer? Another offer.
Did you see it? No,
but the owner told me this verbally himself.
Okay, so the owner told you, so therefore what? There's another offer on the table that looks better than the offer that you're giving him? Why is he talking to you?
No, mine look better.
Okay, then what is the significance of the other offer?
It's cash, and I'm SBA. That's the only thing.
Then your deal is not better if cash is more important to them. So in other words, we break it down, right?
Well, it's not at the price that the doctor wants. So.
Okay, yeah, but in M&A, I would tell you that I got paid from my largest client that has been a client for 10 years. Today, I got a payment advice from their company. And the payment advice is it's my fee for the next year, paid in advance today. Now, in exchange for that, they get significant discounts. You know why? The reason that I'm in business today was that when this pandemic hit, there are plenty of companies that are either had to go into hock, had to lose a lot of money, were not prepared for the pandemic, and suddenly your business is closed. Because there's not a lot of people doing consulting and this and that, or going to negotiation seminars or workshops. All of that died overnight, and so did a lot of companies. And the bigger companies have taken a huge hit. But in the instance for me, you know what happened? Well, guess what? The pandemic happened in March. I'd already been paid by 2 clients for the entire year. And you know why I was paid for an entire year? Because once, back in 2007, when we had an economic turn down and I didn't have any clients paying me in advance, then it took me 7 years to put my business back on when I lost everything in 2007. So the moral of the story is cash today for some people is worth much more money than that's in the bag or uncertain in the future. Time is money.
Yeah, that's
so. The question is, yes, some people. So I'm not saying there, but that. So first of all, there's a lot of underlying questions and issues and probing that you want to do to really understand. Because if you follow the framework that we're talking about, when somebody says to me, or clients, or somebody says, gee, they said they have a deal, my first instinct is to say, what's rule 1? It says test the assumption, presumption, or estimate. So if you think when I say I have a deal that I'm lying, you test that lie. If you think that I'm telling the truth and I actually do have that deal, then you test that truth. And without testing that truth, then you don't assume that it is a lie, and you don't assume that it's the truth. What do?
Tell me.
That's a question. What do you do in a situation like that? Because everyone on your call is thinking about this. How many situations are there? Somebody says something every day. I have somebody tell me, "Wow, they're really a good person. It's a really good person." Pretty much that's a kiss of death right there. Yeah. Ted Bundy that's a whole bunch of women. He's a really good person. Yeah, okay. And Jeffrey Dahmer's like, yeah, he's a really good person. And Dahmer's like, yeah, so are you. So I'm kidding, but the point is, like, if somebody says to me, I got a deal and X, and I say, wow, I believe you because you're a nice person. No, what I think is, you know what? I don't know if they're telling me the truth or not, because that's the fact. I don't know if that's true or not. Then I'm on solid ground where almost any other negotiating framework is not there. When you simply say, hey, what I know is that I don't have a clue. Next question. How important do I believe, or can I establish that piece of information or that position is? How important? Because it may be something that's a deal breaker. Like if it's the difference of you having an opportunity to get the deal without having to take the steps that they're asking you to take, then it's a major issue for you. So if it's a major issue, then what we start thinking about is, what can we do to establish whether or not the thing that we don't know if it's true or not, how do we find out or test whether or not it's true? And there are, a dozen things that we might do to do that. And so it's not a magic formula. It's a quantitative approach. And it sounds, just from speaking to you, and I know from Valentino, have incredible instincts and the sense of what's there, but you want to put a name to it, and then you want to take that step. So that if someone's saying, yeah, they have another deal, if they have another deal, then the follow-up to that might be to say, okay, if we could offer you a little more cash, we can ultimately.
You know what? Okay, so look, let me make you laugh.
Yeah.
Seller wanted 2.2 million originally. Asking
Right.
2.2 million.
Right.
Business net's $1,080,000.
Right.
Yeah, $1,080,000. Okay. Seller 77. He's like, look, I need to get out. Right. Seller, the broker tells me, hey, I submit the LOI at 2.2. He says, look, seller's not going to accept 5-year financing. He's 77. He's like, no, do it shorter.
Right.
And then he says, do offer it at 2 million. I said, what? Yes. No, seriously.
Right.
Then when I speak to him, he's like, listen, man, I'm working with you. He's like, look, I told you only have to do the offer at 2.2. I'm taking 20K off my commission. That's crazy. I'm like, yeah, that is crazy. Then again, the problem is with the other deal. Yes, it's cash, but what we're offering, what he's getting at closing, because he's financing 20% of the deal, is more cash he'll get at closing than if he accepted the other cash offer. Right. So I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. Right. Right. Like I said, I'm kind of having a hard time reading this broker because he wants me to communicate with the seller 0 right now.
Right. So the question is, and on the show, we could certainly talk off air about, because once you know who you're dealing with and you have a relationship with them and you have a challenge in front of you, which is to get movement on the broker who's dealing with their seller. There is a process and a stair step of moving forward. Because again, it's like I said, one way to test that would be, of the issues that are involved in any deal, every deal that we're talking about involves timing, right? And then it involves present value or future value. So we have to understand what's important, because as I just explained, $1 today, look, I did 38, I think I did 38.7% was my investment return last year. So I know that I can take the money that I get today. I'll get most of the discount that I gave to them in order for payment up front. It's a sense of security. For the business, means I can do other things and not have to do things I don't want. And then I can also use some of that resources and invest it and get a return on that investment in creative, because I have the cash to do things that I wouldn't otherwise have. So sometimes money today is more valuable than money tomorrow, because if I don't make it till tomorrow, and we've got small business people and people that are doing smaller deals, then the main thing is to make sure that you have the resources to get from one place to another place, so that you're not dealing out of desperation, but dealing out of plenty and a strategic, not certainty, but certainly a strategic solidness, right? To be solid from a strategic standpoint, not have to be worried about today's bread, right? Does it make sense?
Yeah. So how do you feel about going negative on the deal? Because that's kind of like what we're doing right now. We're like, you know what? You have a better deal. My M&A director, he says, he told the guy, because it kind of got like hostile between my M&A director and that guy. I was like, wow. Anyway, he was like, listen, you have another deal, take it. In any event, if it falls through, circle back with us. But you got a better deal. You're going to give him cash. Go ahead and take
Well,
it.
that's, you know, sometimes that's again, that is a quantitative strategy that actually comes out of from the Karas side of negotiation strategy. That's similar to a take it or leave it. And when you're turning to somebody saying, say, wow, if you have a better deal. Now, the challenge from my perspective is, from a negotiating standpoint, pretty elementary. The idea of using just a straight take it or leave it. The idea when you're testing something or involved or executing a tactic or strategy in negotiation, the rule of thumb is this. If I see that you are using a tactic, then first of all, I'm offended. And second of all, the tactic is not going to be successful because a negotiating tactic that is implemented correctly is a negotiating tactic that the person on the other side never even realizes was a tactic. So in the instance that you're in, that's the lowest hanging fruit, which is to say, oh, gee, you got a better deal, come back with us. Because you and I both know, when you have a deal that's ripe, you don't get that many deals that are that ripe. So you want to play all 9 innings on that deal. And so I think that another possibility would be to focus on there are a couple of phrases that you can use on the sales side. And one of them is to talk to the broker, and you use a phrase that says, wouldn't it be great if we could put this deal together? You're going to invest, we do the deal, we knock this ball out of the park, and this is the first deal we ever do together, because this is not the sum total of our relationship. It's just the beginning. Wouldn't that be great? Now, what do you think you'll say when you say that?
He'd say, that's great. And I would probably say, that's awesome, because you're selling businesses and we're going to buy as many as you can sell us.
Right. So remember, go back, and when I talked about influencing, that phrase is designed to influence the counterpart, to get them thinking about. Now, on the other hand, the deal that's all cash, what's the certainty of that deal? Because you and I both know that if somebody offering you all cash, then for me to believe that, I'd like to see how they verified that cash is there. Another thing to go back and say, when somebody's asking you to do something and they don't want to move forward, partially, as I say, that's partially because we missed a step somewhere. We did not establish the level of legitimacy or trust that they need in order to know that the risk for them of doing business with us is reduced to their threshold that they're ready to move. That's how we know we've established that connection, because when we establish a connection of significance and a connection of trust, the threshold of which the other party recognizes, and that level of trust and that threshold is higher than what they require for their own minimum, then we know that we've done it. Why? Because they do the thing that they wouldn't previously do. So it's an issue. And so then we have to look at a couple of other things. Is the broker someone who responds to pain or to pleasure? Because you know that everybody on earth responds to everywhere. There's fight and flight, and then fight and flight is connected to pain or pleasure. Every action any human being takes is connected to the pleasure continuum. So if you look at that and you say, well, they're not willing to move forward, where is the action you're asking them to take on the pleasure pain? Is it closer to pleasure or pain? You're asking me to do something, I won't do it. Where are you on the on the pleasure pain continuum? Where are you closer to?
What I'm asking them to do, or what they're asking me to do?
Yeah, well, listen, if I ask you to do something and you say, no, I can't do that, are you seeing what I'm
Oh, no,
asking?
it was absolute pain for us. Because that's something we absolutely
Yeah,
cannot
but
do.
what
Absolutely.
if I'm a masochist? See, you have to know there are plenty of people that like get beat up, right? So is
Hmm.
that person a person who is invigorated by the rainbow, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, or is it the risk of loss? Someone who's focused on what they're going to lose today will only make decisions that protect the status quo, which is what
Hmm.
you described when you talked about that broker. You're talking about somebody who's operating from a position of protecting the status quo, not wanting to lose the position that they have. And that position may be the relationship with the seller. So that's what we've got to focus on. So an alternative to the take it or leave it would be to forget the deal altogether. And one of you, are you all working as partners on this particular deal?
Yes.
Okay. So one of you, what I would say, one suggestion would be for one of you to contact the person off the record and just say, hey, look, can we get together for a beer off the record? I'd just like to talk to you a little bit, and just talk for a few minutes. I got a couple of questions. I'd like to share a couple things with you. And that would be akin to going off the record. Take him out of his relationship with the broker. Take you out of your relationship with Valentino or vice versa. Go and not about the deal, because that discussion would be the last thing that you would talk about during the negotiation or during the drink or just a few minutes. You would plan a couple of questions that you would say, like, that would anticipate that you're moving in the right direction. Hey, if we were able to do X, Y, Z, how would that impact this deal for you or for the seller? So, we might have to spend some time coming up with what those issues are, but you spend half hour just talking and learning more about them, creating more personable trust. Maybe you're sharing something that is personal, that's a little bit risky, that lets them know that there's a level of trust. And then when you get to a point where they are willing to do that same thing, that would be a way to test that you've established and enhanced the credibility or the trust level. And then you might say, wow, that's a great how people have so much in common and how human beings are so much more alike than not. Then you would get ready to, like, you're going away and you lose what we call a Columbo close. And you would turn like, so great, I really appreciate you spending that few minutes with me and, just talking to you. Because sometimes, we never get a chance to want to interact and business gets in the way. It's great talking to you. Okay, see ya. So you're getting up to do, what are you going to do next? You're going to turn around. Oh, by the way, if we just, for a second, if we were able to do X, Y, Z, how would that impact this deal? Now, if you've increased the trust, you're asking, you're at a personal place, you're away from the suit, and you're away from the normal interaction of the business. That person is the most vulnerable right there, and at that moment, you'll know either by their verbal response or their lack thereof, and by their body language, whether or not they're A, telling the truth, or B, whether or not there's a possibility of continuing the deal. And then you would talk about your strategy for next steps.
Right, Derrick, touching on trust, let's expand to another topic. I want to talk about perception for a minute. As you know, perception is key, right? So remember when I told you about our accountants willing to analyze the deals and that we had banks as well that were willing to take a look at them? And you told me something along the lines that if you want to maintain the perception, you want to maintain the perception that every deal you send them, they will know is going to be good, right? So essentially, you told me to analyze the deal preliminarily before sending it out. Actually, I did not follow that advice, and I burned out an accountant, deal after deal after deal, about 60 deals. Something did not make sense that we couldn't move forward on, even if the numbers look good, but then we found out on the legal side it had issues. So now, essentially, I analyze everything I get to make sure the deal I send, I know is something worth taking a look at. Can you expand on that?
Oh, absolutely. It's a great question, because it, believe it or not, segues on what we've been talking about, Valentino, because essentially what you just explained to your audience is that by you doing the underwriting and by you asking a lot of questions of yourself, looking at it from both the standpoint of your own, and that was a big discussion that we've had. The idea that, particularly when we're acting on the selling side, way too often, people on the selling side only think about their own perspective, what they need, what they want, what works for them, what costs and what liabilities that impact them. The most astute seller, what we call the most astute CNS negotiator, is someone who is going to analyze the deal both from their own perspective, but then spend some time understanding how is the lender going, or the investor going to look at it? What questions are they going to ask? What credibility do they need? And what you're going to find is, like you say, oh, wow, I hadn't thought about that. I don't have that piece of information, or I could strengthen that piece of, and by doing that, you're acting as like a buoy for your deal, so that now investors and the chairman and other people that you're interacting with know that when Valentino walks into the room and says, this is a deal, that your entire career will be built on the idea that when you say it's a deal, then people know that they can trust that you've done your homework, and that this is going to be a consideration that rises above other opportunities. And that's both an issue of perception, and now you're turning that perception into a reality for them, because then they start connecting you as someone who is presenting better thought out deals, asking better questions, which reduces their perception of risk. Therefore, your credibility goes up, their perception of risk goes down, and then you have more significance and they have more trust, which, believe it or not, segues on exactly everything we were talking
Derrick,
about.
that's great what you talked about. That perception that you know what you're talking about, you ask the right questions, it minimizes the risk that the other party sees. That is big, especially for the people who are building a board, starting out. They're not giving out that perception that they know what they're doing, and that's why these potential board members are turning them down, being like, not at the moment, or come back unless you have capital with a deal, because they're at an all-time risk. One thing people got to understand, yes, it's not just the bias of that potential board member, but they're lending you their name, and that name comes with their track record. And if they perceive you as somebody who can't get the job done, there's an issue there, right, Derrick? Touch on that.
So perfect. That's exactly right.
Absolutely.
So perception. And by the way,
yes.
One last thing.
Yeah.
This is a key thing that your audience can take with you. Remember, and I wrote this years before the last 4 years, perception trumps reality. Perception is more important than reality, because it's perception that people act on, not the reality. So that's an important key part.
Absolutely. Derrick, let's touch on negotiations. Now, before, when I started out, I used to negotiate on price. Remember, I used to tell you if we could get the deal at this time or this multiple, that we could close on it, right?
Yeah.
And the problem was that this led the focus being so much on the price per se that it shifted it from being cooperative to competitive. That if they were not willing to accept my price, I was going to walk away, right? So now I switched it to, I focus on agreeing on a structure of the transaction, and that essentially sets the price, so to speak. What I mean is that there are two reasons someone sells. time or money. And we want to figure out the reasons and structure something around that. And with that, comes a price per se. Am I correct?
Woo! What did you just say? Yeah, you're more.
I'll tell you,
Either
I'm
you're
learning.
really smart and I'm a good teacher, or both. I love that, man.
Both. You
I
already know.
love that. I told you were smart. That's why.
Yeah.
So now your entire audience knows it too. So,
Yeah.
because of course, and you know that we spent some time talking about in CNS, we have very, very different definitions for things like price, cost, and value, and where price ultimately, when somebody says the word price to me, I'll ask you all, what does that mean to you, or what do you think it means to your audience? Price, what does that mean? Yeah. Okay. Exactly. So for many people that you ask, price means what somebody's willing to pay. It means the cost. It means the power. It means how much something's worth. In CNS, in the framework of negotiation we use, price doesn't mean any of that, because price doesn't mean any of that. When something that's international and irrefutable is this, price 100% of the time only has to do with dollars, decimals, and percentages. That's right. It had nothing to do with cost, nothing to do with value, nothing to do with anything but except dollars, decimals, and percentages. And most of the time, when somebody's selling a business that they built, that came with the blood, sweat, and tears of their lifetime, it's not the dollars, the decimals, and the percentages that they are most concerned about. It's about both legacy and at some point the benefits that occur when they sell. And for some people, those tangible and intangible benefits might increase whatever those dollars, decimals, or percentages are, but that's not the only reason that somebody's going to sell. So as you said, you want to look at what is the benefit that you're bringing to someone. Are you bringing more time to their life? Are you bringing more intangible benefit to their life so that they can spend the rest of the time doing something else and enriching themselves in all those ways beyond dollars and cents? When you understand that, that's going to help you put together a deal that ultimately will have dollars, decimals, and percentages connected to it. But the reason they chose you and not somebody else was because you were smart enough to know that focusing on the dollars, decimals, and percentages was not what was most important to them when they're selling a legacy, especially.
Absolutely. So that's why we have, I'd get on the phone with these guys, immediately request financial, see if they're interested in selling. Now I switched it up. I book a meeting and I have a discovery call. Like I said, ask questions about them, their business, but not only what are facts, but what do they feel? Like, have they felt like they've reached the cap in their business? Do they feel like there's more growth, but they can't reach it? Do they feel like if they're in a rut? And that's where we come in.
Right. Because ultimately, once you identify if you go back from a selling standpoint, way back to the top guru of all times in sales would have to be Zig Ziglar. And when you go back to that, Zig would talk about the idea that nobody cares what you know until they know how much you care. And people know how much you care by the questions and the inquisitiveness you have about them. And most of the time, salespeople will go in, focus on the price, and focus on them and what they need and what they can do, and not at all interested in why does that prospect want to sell? What benefits are they looking to gain, or what challenges or problems are they looking to solve? Because once you understand what the challenges are and or what the benefits are, that goes back to pain and pleasure. If it's a benefit, there's pleasure that's going to come as a result of interacting with you. if they're in pain or they're fearful of pain if they don't sell this business, then you become the conduit to remove that pain and replace it with a benefit because you have a solution. And therefore, they need you involved in that. And they don't see that person as a person who's only focused on dollars, decimals, and percentages.
Absolutely. Talking about dollars, decimals, and percentages. Zig Ziglar was talking about that we're taught to doubt what we hear and believe what we see. But if you can tie
Right.
both together, it becomes a powerful tool. In essence, instead of talking so much about the price or what you can offer, send the LOI and it makes it real. They could take a look at the document and read it themselves.
Right. And then they can formulate if they have questions and what those questions are. And by that and the way they're going to measure the way you respond to the questions and the doubts that they have. One thing that I think happens so often is that people mistake a person not having questions as a good sign. And when in fact, someone who has no questions whatsoever and who's unwilling to unequivocally move forward with you clearly has a lot of questions. They just don't trust you enough to ask them because they don't believe that you care enough about them or that you're the person that's going to be able to produce that benefit or avoid that pain that is underlying why they want or are interested in selling the business.
Absolutely.
Or,
Derrick,
you know.
I want to thank you so much for this time you've given us. Already reached the hour. I don't want to take much more. If you'd be open
my privilege, man.
to coming in for another video later down the line, would you be interested in that?
Yeah, sure. You listen. Given the fact that I see that you're learning so much and doing so good, absolutely.
I appreciate that, Derrick.
And it's such a great privilege to talk.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, gentlemen. You take care. All right, thank you. Nice to meet you too. Thanks so much. All right,
everybody,
bye,
make sure to
Bye.
thank Derrick. Take care, Derrick. Number one in the world. Hey, man, if the pros are validating our knowledge, what do you got to say? What's your opinion worth?
Let's go. Number one.
Nothing.
M&A group.
Let's go,
Number
man.
one M&A
You already know
podcast
you're in the
in the
right
world.
hands. You're in the right hands, man. Number one in the world. And when we talk about negotiations, we talk about closing. There's a lot of people who are presenters. They're good at presenting, but cannot close a door. That's where we come in. So I'll leave it on